Hi everyone, I'm Jim Rizoli and this is Rizoli TV, and today we have a special guest, Paul Fromm from Canada. We are going to be talking about a couple things. First of all, we're going to be talking about Ernnst Zundel and a memorial that was held up in Canada by Paul's group up there. And Paul, you could talk about your group, who it is, and what you did and all that. So we'd love to hear from you. So why don't you tell us the memorial that was said for Ernst?
Well, our previous memorial for Barbara Kalashka, who was a very important free speech lawyer who passed away in June, was under a great deal of pressure. The library, some politicians tried to cancel it, and so on. So we have this memorial in a rather confidential location. We did not want the word getting out, and it didn't. We had an absolutely full house of admirers of Ernnst Zundel. Many of them had been present back in the 80s and 90s at his various court appearances. And a number of the people who'd been close to him attended and got to speak. So it was quite an emotional affair. We of course, had talks blended with music, and one of the tunes we always like to have played is a song called Die Gedanken sind frei, which means thoughts are free. And any of your listeners can Google that on YouTube and hear it. It's kind of the fact that if we want, the enemy can never stop us, because thoughts are free. They can put us in jail, as they did for 7 years with Ernnst Zundel. They can bomb his house, firebomb his house, and that was incidentally a crime claimed by Irv Rubin. And Irv Rubin was the head of the Jewish Defense League in the United States. He served time in prison. In fact, he died in prison for trying to firebomb, I think it was the offices of Congressman Issa, who's a Lebanese a member of the House of Representatives and a Republican. Rubin was a thoroughly bad piece of business, and he told an acquaintance of mine at the gun show in Montana, I guess it'd be well over a decade ago, that he was the one who did Ernnst Zundel's house. And we know he was in Toronto because he and another Jew were apprehended a couple of days after the firebombing of Ernnst Zundel's place, trying to get into the. It was hard to secure the place because of all the fire and water damage, and they're actually apprehended there and booted out. So I guess the song means a great deal to us because it really says there's hope, and no matter what the dark forces do to us, if we're true to our beliefs, thoughts are free. You can't stop the thinking. And I know I'm digressing, but if there's something I have discovered, particularly young men who get it, they have educated themselves over the internet. So despite all the censorship on the internet, Facebook accounts closed, I think your access to community cable stopped, PayPal stopped. No matter what the harassment, there is now so much good material out there that intelligent young people, particularly young men, are educating themselves, and that is a real encouragement, because in Ernst's life, he had a fair number of successes and he had setbacks, and I think there's always the tendency, perhaps, just to look at the setbacks. And one of the things that was so evil that was done to him, and it haunted him to his grave, is that he was not allowed back into the United States, and his wife, Ingrid Grimland, actually now Ingrid Zundel, would be, to have gone to Germany would have been 5 years in jail, and she's 82 or so. She might not even survive that. So three governments kept this couple apart. Canada wouldn't let Ernnst Zundel in. Well, actually, Canada kicked Ernnst Zundel out. The United States wouldn't let him in. Germany wouldn't let Ingrid in. So that they could really only meet in third countries. And they're an elderly couple. He died. He was 78. She's, I believe, 82. a reasonable expectation is that they would be able to spend their last years together, especially for countries that pat themselves on the back about how progressive and caring and so on. Germany is appalling. The country that is whose treacherous leadership is flooding that country with Muslim third worlders who will change it beyond recognition, and yet they think they're democratic. Canada is Mr. Goody Two Shoes to the whole world. We're the nice people. We're not very nice at all. America, the land of the free and the home of the depraved. I mean, the brave. Appalling.
Yeah.
What was done to Zundel? He never committed a crime in the United States. You've got all sorts of criminals pouring across your border, desperate criminals, violent criminals. No problemo. Ernnst Zundel, he's out.
I don't understand about what happened with him is how they ended up getting him back in Canada, and he wasn't a citizen, right?
Well, law is all little technicalities, and when the United States decided to deport him, the rule would be he would be deported to his last place of residence. Well, his last place of residence was Canada, where he had legal status. He was a landed immigrant, which I think is about the same as having a green card in the States. He'd twice been turned down for citizenship, but he was a landed immigrant. He had a status in Canada. So he was, I would say, correctly deported to Canada. And then we played a dirty trick on him. In the wake of 9/11, our government was under some pressure to bring in anti-terrorist legislation. Well, as usual in things like this, where it's not carefully thought out, or maybe it is thought out, they do everything wrong. They gave control over the internet to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. It took us years to get it back, and basically the truth was no defense. So anything the Zionist lobby didn't like, they come after these people. So that was one thing to fight terrorism. In fact, some spokesman for the Jewish Congress said that we have to fight terrorism. We have to fight it on the internet. I thought, no matter what account you accept of 9/11, nobody said computers were flying through the air and hitting the Twin Towers. So they got some control that way. But the other thing they brought in, this is what affected Ernst, was a national security certificate. And what that means is if two cabinet ministers sign off that a non-citizen is a threat to national security. So if you're a landed immigrant but you're not a citizen, or a visitor and you're not a citizen, and they hit you with a national security certificate, it says that you are a threat to national security and you can be removed. There is a hearing process or appeals process, which the courts have subsequently found to be a joke and largely unconstitutional. And what happens there is that you appear before a specially designated federal judge. It's not just any old judge. There are only a few that are designated for this. And evidence is brought in against you, which you can try to refute. But a lot of the evidence is secret. So there'll be secret evidence, secret witnesses. You'll never get a chance to cross-examine the witness or even know who it is. And from a defense point of view, that's critical. For instance, evidence, let's say, from a well-respected member of the community would have credibility. Evidence from the village idiot, not so much. But as the defense, we didn't know. We would get a kind of an executive summary of what was said by somebody who cannot be named. It's like fighting shadows. It was a joke. It went on for 2 years. The judge, the specially designated judge, had been the former Solicitor General in the Mulroney government. And that meant he was in charge of our spy agency. Just so happened that almost all the evidence against Ernst came from our spy agency. So Doug Christie, when he was still Ernst's lawyer, asked the judge to recuse himself. That is, to take himself off the case because of a reasonable apprehension of bias. And the way Doug explained it was this: Blay had been the boss of the spies, and now he's being asked to judge the spies' information. Can that be seen to be done fairly? He said no. Worse than that, though, and this is the 10-ton elephant in the room, the spies know a lot about the politicians. And Blay, if he has some skeletons in his closet, and I have no idea whether he did or didn't, he would know that the spooks know, and he would know that they knew he knew. Now, can this poor defendant expect fairness from a guy whom the spies who are testifying may well have something on? Well, anyway, he asked the judge to recuse himself. He didn't. His replacement, Peter Lindsay, twice asked the judge to recuse himself. He wouldn't. So we have a tainted judge, procedures that would later be declared by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional, all ranged up against Ernst, and he was, after 2 years, ordered deported, and he was snuck out of the country on a private plane in handcuffs. And we're still wondering who put up that money. He wasn't put on a normal commercial plane to go to Germany. He was privately flown out of the country, and as soon as he arrived in Germany, he went on trial for doubting World War II, the Hollywood version of World War II, and got the maximum 5 years in prison. I have to explain just how empty their case was. The argument is he's a threat to national security. Well, in Canada, that's spelled out. Now, in some countries, to be against the government is to be a threat to national security. But in Canada, it's carefully spelled out, and it really does make sense. You're a threat to national security if you're advocating the violent overthrow of the government of Canada or any province. Well, okay, that makes sense. Or you're spying for a foreign country. Okay, that makes sense. Or committing espionage for a foreign country. Or your activities are dominated or controlled by a foreign country. I can think of organizations that are threats to national security. The entire Jewish lobby is tied to Israel. But anyway, never mind. I guess the fourth or fifth category would be people who use serious acts of violence to promote their political agenda. And and they even spell out what those are. That's not a punch up in the streets. That's arson, kidnapping, attempted murder, things like that, or murder.
I have a question. I have a question, Paul. Why couldn't he get out on bail?
Oh, a good question. That would be the normal thing. You're charged with, or in this case, he has a national security certificate. We applied numerous times for bail. They would not grant it, and even bail conditions with all sorts of restrictions that he'd have to live at so-and-so's house. So-and-so would be responsible for him. He'd have to be in by 10 o'clock, all these things. No offer was good enough. Other than vindictiveness, it makes no sense. Because even if Ernst, say, were on bail and fled the country, wait a sec, that's what they want. They want him out.
I know, right?
It's like, but no. And he was kept in solitary confinement. The light was never turned off in his cell. He would be given his toothbrush several times a day, and then the toothbrush would be stored out in the passageway outside his cell. You know, people with their dirty feet going by. Just the degradation that sounds like one of those horror stories about the detention camps of World War II. Right. And he had dental problems. He was denied dental care for a considerable period of time. He was treated abominably by a system that prides itself on human rights and all that. No, he was never granted bail, and even though obviously we tried.
Now,
just to tell you the case, this is the public part of the case. This is what we did here. Well, why is it that Ernnst Zundel, who is none of those things, advocating the violent overthrow of the government, using serious acts of violence or run by a foreign power, well, how does he possibly qualify as a threat to national security? Well, he's a terrorist. Oh, wait a sec. He never committed a crime, and is a pacifist. Came to Canada because we didn't have the draft. Was a Jehovah's Witness. No, Seventh-day Adventist, actually. At least that's how he was brought up. A man who comes out of a peaceful environment and never committed a crime. How does that guy become a terrorist? Well, that's our spy agency. They explained that to us. In the late 70s, Ernnst Zundel attended a couple of lectures by Dr. William Pierce in the States. He never joined the National Alliance. He never contributed to it. Okay, Dr. William Pierce wrote several books, and one of them was the Turner Diaries. A man by the name of Timothy McVeigh supposedly read the Turner Diaries. Timothy McVeigh supposedly blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. Ernnst Zundel's a terrorist. You got the connection?
Yeah.
If this was a real court of law, it would be laughable. Any Crown attorney or prosecutor who brought forth a story like that would be told, "Where's the beat? Where's the evidence?" What does Ernst have to do with McVeigh? In fact, for that matter, what did Dr. William Pierce have to do with McVeigh? Or for that matter, did McVeigh actually even do it? And there are questions on all those fronts. Anyway, that was the case. So Ernnst Zundel's a terrorist. But by which reasoning, anybody who ever attended a Dr. William Pierce meeting.
Now, was he would have been considered a terrorist in Canada, right? Is that what it would have been? Not the United States.
Not in the States, no. And this law, this national security certificate aspect of the law would be almost entirely not struck down by the Supreme Court a couple of years after Ernst was sent back to Germany. But of course, Canada never said, "Oh, we made a mistake with you, Mr. Zundel. You really should come back. You're a landed immigrant. You've got a right to stay in Canada." As Ernst often said, and he said this not bitterly, but as an observation, there's one law for everybody else and another law for Ernst. Or more generally, there's one law for everybody else and a different law for Germans.
All right, so now he goes to Germany. So what do you know about what happened there?
He's charged with inciting racial hatred, and you do that by questioning the new religion of Holocaust. One of his lawyers was a woman named Sylvia Stoltz. She drew some time in jail because she defended him too vigorously. Now you're dealing with a rotten, sick judicial system where a lawyer can be punished for being too vigorous. In fact, that's what happens in communist China. It's very hard to find a lawyer who would vigorously fight a case because, the government's right. I think they have a conviction rate or something like 98% in communist China. So unless maybe there's a technical difficulty or a failure in identification, you're not going to get out, and lawyers don't want to seem to be somehow against the system.
Right. So now, is it true that though he was treated better in jail in Germany than in Canada?
Oh yes, in Germany he was not in solitary confinement. In Germany, friends could visit him and bring him food. Not that he wasn't fed in prison, but treats or home cooking or that type of thing. No way in Canada we could. It was even difficult to get him literature. The restrictions differ from prisoner to prisoner. I'm trying to remember his. If he wanted a book, I couldn't bring him a book, but he could order it from a bookstore or the publisher. There were all sorts of weird restrictions, and he was only allowed pencils. I don't know if you enjoy writing with pencils. I don't, but he was allowed, and there were only stubs. He'd be allowed a stub of pencil like this.
Right.
He had tremendous correspondence, and then he was allowed colored pencils, like a child's colored pencils, and he did all sorts of beautiful little drawings on pieces of a paper. I'd say about an eighth of a letter-sized piece of paper, whatever a square like that would be. He would draw something from nature, maybe bulrushes or an eagle or a flower, and then he'd usually say something like "thank you," because these are thank yous for either letters people had sent him or donations, and he'd often write it in English and French and German or Spanish. And these are real collector's items and works of art.
Now, was this in Canada or was this in
Canada? in Canada.
Canada. So when he went to Germany, though, he wasn't in solitary then, right? He could get around better, and he could meet people if they came and visit him. Is that what it was?
Oh, yes. And he could have visitors in Canada too, although there were restrictions. You never got to see him. Um, you never got to see him without a big, heavy plastic barrier between you.
Right.
Um, uh, he was considered a highly dangerous person.
Wow.
At that point, he was, let me think, well, over 10 years ago, so he'd be in his, say, 65.
Yeah.
Dangerous. It's often said the law is an ass, and the more I see of the legal system, I totally agree.
Right. Right. All right. So he was in Germany. He was treated better. He had better food. He could get around a little bit better. Did he have like a work routine? Did he work in there in the prison?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not aware of that.
Well, anyway, he got out in 210, right?
That's
Got
right.
out of there in 210, and then he went back to his homestead, 400-year-old homestead, I guess, and that was it. I mean, and that's where he died, just a few weeks ago. So
Yeah, he died August the 5th in
yeah,
a house that is, I believe, over 400 years old. It was considerably dilapidated when he got there in 2010. So he has spent a good deal of the intervening time improving it, and repairing, and so on. He was also under parole conditions for, I think, 3 years, which severely restricted what he could say. And of course, the authorities were just ready to pounce should he say anything. But you see, what's not widely known or understood is that by the time the American authorities, and that's when your Homeland Security chief was Chertoff.
yeah,
We believe the hatred, the German hatred, and the hate for Ernnst Zundel came directly from Chertoff. When Ernst got to the U.S. in 2000, he was married to Ingrid Zundel, and she sponsored him, obviously. He, in the intervening 3 years or so, went through all the necessary an FBI interview, various health checks, other interviews, and Ingrid has had access under Freedom of Information to the FBI file, and essentially the FBI had closed the file. They said, this side got no problem with this guy. And there was apparently just one more interview to go, and it was scheduled, and Ernst's lawyer said, I have a conflict here. So I'm going to fax the INS and people and tell them, or ask them if we can arrange for another date. And he didn't hear back, so he faxed them again. Didn't hear back. And so he said to Ernst, well, this happens all the time. There's constant problems with lawyers and scheduling things. This is a minor interview, and it'll just get rescheduled. So Ernst didn't go to it, and a couple months later, in I think it was February of 2003, his home in Tennessee, near Pigeon Forge, was raided by a takedown task force of federal marshals and various deputies and so on, all to arrest a 60-something unarmed man. But they took him off in handcuffs. He wasn't able to have his medication, and they had him out of the country so fast he was out within 2 weeks. In a litigation that has gone on almost ever since. I believe it was whichever circuit is in Cincinnati. I think it's the 6th Circuit. But anyway, has stated that what was done to him was wrong, was unconstitutional. And you'd say, great, he gets back. Well, no, not so fast. Law is always very tricky. He could get back. He could probably overturn what was done to him if he could get back to the States. But he can't get back to the States because he was banned. And he'd probably need a presidential pardon or order were any of the presidents since 2003 likely to sign such? So that was a catch-22. But what was done to him in the United States was terrible. And then finally, you know, it's hard to know what causes death with some of the heart attack. But about 3 weeks before his death, Ingrid got word that through the INS I'm sorry, through Homeland Security, that and this is from some Jew that made this order, that Ernnst Zundel would never be allowed back into the United States because he was a bad guy.
Right. Undesirable. That's what they call it.
Yeah, undesirable. Now, you know, if he'd only done undesirable things like rob, rape, and kill, well, we might give us a second thought. But no, he's got bad ideas.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, anyway, that's a good sum up of Ernnst Zundel, and we're going to miss him. But on the good side of this, we still have people that are going to be out there, you know, like you, myself, Germa Rudolph. We have a group of people that are continuing on with the cause, and that's important. I mean, you know, we don't stop. You just keep going ahead, and that's all you can do at this point in time.
Oh, you've reminded me of something. I think I was sort of starting with the irony was that when Ernst moved to the United States, he had switched careers. He said, you know, I've done my part, more than my part, for revisionism. You know, he had a house blown up, several bomb threats, a bomb delivered to him. You know, he'd been physically attacked, he'd defamed, he'd spent millions and millions of dollars, much of it his own, to defend himself. And he'd really done a great deal. The Leute report, which he financed, and so many other things. And Ernst had other interests in life, and this is something that, you know, a lot of people who only look at the mass media don't know. Ernst, of course, started off as a graphic artist, but he was also a very gifted, you know, artist. He and Ingrid had opened Soaring Eagles gallery in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. They wanted to get more into the art. He also had several other interests. One was, I'm not sure what the technical name is of it, is a certain type of gardening. It's natural gardening, and you ward off insects and so on by planting, let's say, lettuce next to tomatoes, so he and also alternative health. So Ernst had other interests. He had basically retired when he moved to the United States because there were people like Germa Rudolph who were coming on the scene. And Germa was publishing up a storm, and Germa also had something Ernst didn't have. Germa is a trained scientist. Ernst is a communicator. So Germa brought needed skills, and he was younger. So Ernst, I don't think this was ever done in a formal ceremony, but essentially the baton had been passed on to Germa. Ernst was retiring to do other things, but still, the never forget, never forgive, vindictive predator came after him.
Right. You know, I think though, Paul, Paul, if he got any of those business type things going there, I bet you they would have shut him down somehow. You know, that's how they are. Like you said, they're vindictive. And if he was out there painting and making all these beautiful paintings and trying to sell them, I bet you they would have gave him a hard time.
Oh yes, it would probably have to be underground. But anyway, that's where he was at when they came after him. And I often thought, even from their own point of view, unless vindictiveness and destruction is really what it's all about, hey, he's out of the scene. Zundel has retired. Worry about some other guy.
Right, no. Well, anyway, his legacy moves on. Well, the next thing I want to talk to you about is current events, and especially what's been happening in the news, because I've been involved in this up here tremendously, and I can explain a little bit, but I want to hear from you about your viewpoint of Charlottesville, and what's your take on all this going on down there?
Okay, I get this from a Canadian reporter who was there. She has a fair deal of integrity, and I guess because of that has been purged from Rebel News. Her name's Goldie, although she's not Jewish, she's Ukrainian. and Ezra Levant has purged her. But anyway, I've got that from her, and I get it from a South African friend of mine who was there. He's with a group called the Suidlanders or Southlanders. They're a civil defense group, and his name is Simon Roche, and he was there. Okay, my take on it from these two sources is this. The reason the establishment is going bananas, including supposedly conservative people like Senator Orrin Hatch or Mike Huckabee, is that they have suddenly awakened to the fact there are angry, organized white people, and they're not our age, young people. Somehow they have escaped the garbage, the indoctrination, the mind rot that's been pumped in the education system and on the media. And they're young and they're organized, and they just numbers vary, but let's say probably a couple thousand in Charlotte. That's immense. There's been nothing like this, at least in our memory. Rallies, yeah, something like this, and they're a lot of the right ideas. They said that one of the chants that got people so upset was, we don't want to be replaced by the Jew. Well, yeah, we don't want the population replaced by elitist policies. And the Jews have had a lot to do with the immigration changes in Canada and the United States. It may be an uncomfortable fact, but they did. And so these young people are largely, I think, pretty informed, pretty militant, looked good. I mean, these were not the type of, the stereotypical backwoods guys with no teeth and kind of knuckles dragging on the ground, and every second word is Negro or something. Yeah. These are nice-looking guys and women. Well, this is shocking. I think, although the city did cancel their parade permit or their event permit, and they had to go to federal court, and they got it. Which shows a fair degree of organization. And I think what the city authorities decided to do was to arrange for violence, which would then give them the excuse to cancel. And this I get from both reporters. The nationalists were herded so that they could only enter the park through one entrance, and that was right in front of the Antifa, many of whom are violent. They're the ones with masks over their faces and clubs and bags of urine and other wonderful stuff. And they're forced right by them. At first they were shouting, then there was fighting, and then the city authorities who wanted to do this all along said state of emergency and shut it down. Okay, that's that. In other words, as Donald Trump finally realized, there were two sides to this, and there was violence from the other side. Frankly, from what I gather, almost all the violence was from the other side. I mean, I don't count it as violence. If somebody takes a swing at you, you take a swing back. But the violence was overwhelmingly on the part of the people who, as Donald Trump says, didn't have a permit. Right. The Antifa didn't have a permit to go there and mix things up. So that's significant. What about the incident of the fellow who rammed his car into the anti-racists? Well, this is where Simon Roche, as far as I know, he's the only person who is who's got this out. But this was on the this was on an interview with Brian Rue the other day. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's been on radio as well. And what Roche saw was this. That the fellow's car was being shaken by the anti-racists. They were trying to topple it. He says, I've been in situations like that in South Africa. I've been in violent confrontations with the communists and the blacks, where there's a lot of violence. And he says, the adrenaline takes over. That guy had probably never been in a situation like that. He fears for his life. So what does he do? He moves the car forward fast. He tries to get out of there. Yeah. And then when he smashes it and incidentally killed somebody, you then see him on TV reversing. He's still trying to escape. Right. A person who actually wanted to use the car for the terrorist actions that are being done in France and in England. You do it a little differently. You try to get the people out in the open in a mall and then run them down. He was afraid for his life, and I think this will come out at the trial. However, of course, the media plays this up, and maybe my problem is I only listen to CNN in terms of the States, but it is nonstop. 59 minutes and 59 seconds per hour hate Donald Trump. And the party line is the only thing Trump could possibly have done is a complete repudiation and denunciation of the Klan, white nationalism, white supremacy. And Trump pointed out, this march was essentially about saving part of American heritage, and that was the statue of General Robert E. Lee. But we now see the gloves off. It's all-out ideological war.
Right. Now that guy, like you mentioned, if he really wanted to take people down, he would have kept going straight, right, and just run everybody down.
Yes, and what he was trying. He's 20 years old, and I don't know a lot about him other than some of that he had some problems with his mother and all that. But the way Simon saw it was an act of panic. Now, what would be the legal culpability of that? I'm not a lawyer, certainly not an American lawyer, so I don't know. But this puts a whole new shine on it.
Right. You know what bothers me about this? How come we didn't see anything about him going to court?
I think it was by video, wasn't it?
What's that?
I think it was by video, but I might be wrong.
I don't know. I mean, why didn't CNN and all these news people, why didn't they show him in court and all the things going on in court? Nothing. I didn't see anything about it. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I don't know either. I think this is a very crucial time. I think we can take a lot of hope from the fact that there were so many young people, mostly males. That's the good news. The bad news is that I think in the short run, there's going to be wild repression. There's information now out on that I believe Uber. I want to be fair here. Uber, I think Google, Uber, and maybe PayPal, but there's some tech bigs that are going to try to purge all known neo-Nazis or white supremacists. But as we both know, these are empty terms. I mean, Donald Trump has been declared a white supremacist, white nationalist. My own view is Trump's a nationalist. Well, I don't think he's. He may not have thought it deeply enough to be anything more, but it doesn't matter. They'll stick a label on you. And as you know from dealing with these tech outfits, it's also impersonal. I got a 2-minute penalty, so I was in the penalty box yesterday on Twitter. And what did I do? Well, actually, here's one of the few times where you actually find out what the crime was. I tweeted to some commie who'd said something, I don't even remember what it was, "You silly bitch," and then whatever it was, my little point of view in less than 140 words. Anyway, well, but as you know, probably dealing with these places, an account will be shut down. You appeal, but you don't know what you're even appealing about. And look at this again is about all you can say. You're always answered by emails if you're answered at all. There's never a phone number. You can never really engage anybody. So they can do. It looks as though certain aspects of corporate America are going to make war on white people more explicitly than they have. Implicitly, they've done it for years through going along with affirmative action, but now it's right out there in the open.
Yeah, I just want to I'll let you know what's going up here. Saturday, they're having a big rally, a continued rally now, but it's called these people, free speech people. They're supposed to be free speech people. And they're just young kids, you know what I mean, young college kids. And I honestly feel what's happening is they call alt-right free speech people. I think they're just hijacking the whole situation, and the Jews are behind them, because one of the things that they said couldn't be discussed at this free speech rally, because I was going to go to it. Okay, the news has been bugging me and getting in touch with me with the last couple of days, and I was interviewed on TV and this and that. I don't know when it's going to show who the heck knows, but anyway, I really think that that's what's happening here. I think they've been infiltrated. These people here, the alt-right people. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that one of the topics they said that can't be discussed at this free speech rally was the Holocaust.
Oh, I see.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, so that's why the news guy asked me if I was going yesterday. It's in the paper today. He says, "Are you going to that meeting?" I says, "No, I'm not going to that meeting, because one of the topics, my pet topic, is the Holocaust, and they don't want to discuss it there. So why would I be going to this free speech meeting if I can't have my free speech?" So you see what's happening here.
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about that situation, but I do know that in Canada they've tried to hijack the free speech movement as well, to keep it tame, so that you can talk about certain things, which are great. That's fine, but you can't. It's beyond the pale to question the Hollywood version of World War II, or I like to call the new religion of Holocaust. It's hard to know. How to react to that. I do know that there are little rebellions bursting up all over the place. We're going to have, or there's going to be some sort of an alt-right anti-immigration protest in Vancouver tomorrow. This is being organized. I won't say overnight, but I'd say within 72 hours. The mayor of Vancouver is urging people to come out and protest. I mean, he's as much as inciting the usual crazies to come out and cause violence. I think the establishment in both our countries has been shaken by this. I was talking to Pastor Rob, and Pastor Tom Rob. He was actually not there, but many of his people were in Charlottesville, and he said that people like Mike Huckabee and Orrin Hatch, who both strongly denounced this, feel exposed because they, particularly Orrin Hatch, because has been a United States senator practically since independence, and he's been as long as the Republicans are in, he's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And what has he done for white Christians? With a career in Congress, he's been in almost 40 years. Well, has done anything about affirmative action? Mass discrimination against whites getting into universities, whites getting jobs, or whites getting promotions? Nothing. Well, what about the invasion across the border? Nothing. So he's reduced to denouncing this rally, saying, "I lost a brother to fighting Nazis." Yeah. So what does this have to do with Sure?
Yeah, right.
Adolf Hitler didn't run the rally in Charlottesville. You see, they have primped and paraded around as the defenders of Middle America or Middle American Christians, which tends to be almost a code word, for mostly white people. But they've spectacularly done nothing for white people, even when they've had, as they do now, they've got a majority in the House and Senate and a Republican president. They had the same for a while under Bush II. They still couldn't do anything. Why could they not do anything? Because they don't want to do anything.
Right.
They basically are complicit. And these guys buy into the same cultural Marxist malarkey that the Democrats do. And this showed this past week, a lot of these Republicans like Lindsey Graham and so on, that deep down, they're not for our people. And that's why they've gone along with this immigration invasion. They don't believe in white people. They have their differences with the Democrats are largely country club economics. The Republicans would like slightly lower taxes and fewer regulations, and that's probably a good thing. But the fundamental changes in America, To talk about, to go along with the removal of Confederate statues, and yet you can't turn a corner in the United States without a Martin Luther King Boulevard or a Martin Luther King High School.
Nelson Mandela.
Or
We have him here.
Nelson Mandela, a white killing communist. Martin Luther King, well,
Right.
J. Edgar Hoover called him the biggest liar in the United States. Strongly influenced by the communists, a plagiarist. I mean, his university thesis, where he got by which he got his doctorate of divinity, was largely forged. This man is a disgrace and a moron, and yet Americans are supposed to somehow honor him as as somebody great. Appalling.
Right.
And these birds went along with it.
Right. Did you know, Paul, that in Seattle, there's a guy there that has a statue of Lenin that's in downtown Seattle. And
no.
Yeah. There's 3 of them in the United States, I heard, statues of Lenin. All right, some private people have them here and there. So anyway, in Seattle they have the statue of Lenin. Nobody coming after that.
No.
Oh, jeez, unbelievable what's going on here.
Yeah, shut down over this past weekend. I think what shut down over this past weekend is that a lot of people being discredited. Some of the conservative leadership that attacked the marchers have discredited themselves. And I mean, if you listen to CNN, the only person who's discredited is Donald Trump. I think he managed to save most of his bacon. I think, as he later said, but he should have practiced it. He shouldn't have reacted the first day because you don't know. As he said, it took a while before some of the facts came in. Well, why condemn one side? Well, actually, his initial instinct was right. He said, there was problems on both sides. And then I think it was his condemnation on, was it Monday or Tuesday, which was, I thought, really written for him. His heart wasn't in it, but he said the words. I don't think politicians should be condemning any Americans for expressing their views. They ought to listen, shut up, and listen to what the people are saying, not condemn. Well, I condemn him, but I don't condemn that guy. Trump generally knew better. He didn't get suckered into the disowning your supporters game that they've always tried to play with conservatives, at least as far back as I can remember, going back to Goldwater. He basically, through the campaign, handled it, I thought, fairly well. I mean, my position would be, well, listen, I'm in the business of trying to get votes. I have no idea why people support me or vote for me. I welcome everybody's support. Just because A supports me doesn't mean I hold all the views of A. If you want to know what I believe in, ask me.
Paul, you mentioned that fellow Rob. He's a minister. Is that what he is?
Yes, he's a pastor.
Now, Diane was telling me that he was coming up here.
No, well, I talked to Pastor Rob on when we were preparing to do this. I think it'd be Tuesday, and no, he had not been in Charlottesville, but many of his people were. So he had.
Right, but I mean, was he coming up to Boston? I heard he was coming up to Boston.
That I don't know.
Oh, okay. I really wish he wouldn't.
No, he didn't. Well, he didn't tell me, and I didn't ask because I only knew about Boston when I watched your video yesterday.
Yeah.
The one with your brother.
Yeah. I hate to say, like I said, I think if we go to this rally, we're going to get creamed. I mean, honestly, we're going to get beat to a pulp here because, especially if they know who we are. You know what I'm saying? I don't trust them.
I would think the other risk is the risk of embarrassment. If they say, but you can't speak,
right.
Then, to some extent, well, they've lost face, but you've lost face. Now, I had a delightful incident that just was all completely serendipity. A young person invited me to a rally at it's a government park near our legislative buildings. It was back on the I guess it was the 15th of June. No, the 15th of July, and it was to stand up for 5 young guys who are members of the armed forces who had a little protest in Halifax on Dominion Day on the 1st of July. And they were protesting some Indians that wanted to have Lord Cornwallis' statue torn down, blah, blah, blah. And so they flew our old flag, which is behind me, sang "God Save the Queen," had a few words with the Indians, and then went away. Well, all hell broke loose. They disrupted the India, which wasn't true. So what we had in Toronto, or what some young people had in Toronto, was a rally in support of them, and it was organized by students in support of a free society, and I think also the Proud Boys. The it was the security was a joke. My security guy was going bananas. He didn't know who was who, what was what. There were no lines. There were two anti-racist groups that the police kept away, but then there were videographers floating all over the place. So anyway, the students made a couple of speeches, and then they said, "Does anybody else want to speak?" And no, he didn't. He spoke a little bit more. He says, "Well, my voice is getting tired. Um, does anybody else want to speak?" So okay, I walked up and gave him my card, and I spoke for 90 seconds as to how people could help these five guys, and within minutes, it was all over the Twitter sphere that the notorious neo-Nazi had spoken at their rally, and now this went on for a couple of weeks, where by the Proud Boys, it turns out that their Facebook editor is a Jew. Well, they denounced me and blah blah blah, and they have nothing to do or gender. They're for all genders, even though you cannot be a member of them unless you're a male, and you can't bring your girlfriend. I mean, they're a weird lot. Many of the rank and file are good people. The leadership leaves lots to be desired. Well, it's the same with the free speech students. Um, they actually, I think, their people meant well, but they came under tremendous pressure. So I guess my point was, you don't want to put yourself in a position where they'll just say you can't speak. Um, Unless you come there from a position of strength. Uh, I took them unawares. I mean, I hadn't even thought that there'd be a speaking opportunity. I was just there to wave the flag and see what was happening. But occasionally things come your way.
All right. Well, I tell you though, this event tomorrow is going to be big. I mean,
And it's in Boston.
it's in Boston. They are anticipating a huge crowd, and I think most of the people are going to be alt left. But because this is how they get to show themselves. You know what I'm saying? The alt left, they get there because there's hardly any conservatives where I am that will show up at these things because they're going to be beat. I'm telling you, I've been to these things, and these people are just violent people. They'll beat on you. I mean, we were thinking about going today, and I was going to do it like a show there today if we could get there in time, but before dark. But anyway, that's if I did go, I'd go today, and tomorrow I wouldn't go because it's going to be just crazy nutty there, and they'll kill us, I think. Because I had this experience before. My brother and I were pushed off the Boston Common by the rowdies, and the police had to escort us and protect us with horses between us and them to stop them from coming to get us. They were actually going to beat us, I'm telling you. So we got out of the common because of that, and we were afraid. I'm not kidding you. I never was so afraid of my life being somewhere, and I really thought we were going to get killed. And that's how the alt left is.
Is that recently?
Oh no, 2006. This was called. There was a freedom rally. Okay.
Oh yeah.
The Paul Revere Freedom Rally. Frosty Woodridge. Do you know him? Woodridge, or whatever his name is?
Yeah, not personally, but I know who he is.
Well, he got on with the motorcycle group, and they went all across the country, and they ended up in Boston. And when they left, when those motorcycles left, my brother and I are standing there now with all the crazies around us, all by ourselves. We had nobody else there. And it was like, oh no, we got to get the heck out of here. And they followed us all the way. And I went up to the cop because the cops were still in. I said, look, you got to protect us from these people. And he did. The cops were good. I mean, they were on horses. And he goes, look, just get in front of us, and we'll be behind you. And it's on the internet. The Paul Revere Freedom Ride 2006. And you might be able to see us with the video. We were videoing it as they were coming after us. Pretty interesting stuff. It's there for people to see,
the Paul Revere riders decided to leave Boston, but not until they were basically run out of Boston. You know, you don't mind, but these people on the Paul Revere ride are really decent people. They didn't swear to anybody. They didn't give anybody the finger. They were respectful. And yet you got the opposition over here, just a bunch of lunatics, out of control lunatics who think that if you don't agree with them on something, they're going to just pound it into you. Calling these nice people, family people, respectful people, racist, bigots, and everything you could possibly say to them. It just shows you that this is the America that we're going to be having in a few more years with these lunatics, this girl with the hair, with the glasses. These are the people that you're going to be seeing take over this country. Absolute mental people. I was ashamed, and Boston should be ashamed at these people, that they are even here to protest against Americans who are trying to stand up for rule of law. It's disgusting that these people are even here living in this country, treating people like this, giving the finger. Incredible. Well, we thought it was over, but I guess it wasn't. This young woman, or whoever she is, this nutso case up here on the left, decides to attack us. After all, we're videotaping. Let's attack them. This little maniac, whoever she was, couldn't be seen on camera, though, but didn't want to be seen on camera, huh? But here she is holding a sign up 2 inches away from me. And now, what happens? We have to be escorted out of Boston. Well, these lunatics are chasing us down the street. And what? Because we were videotaping? What, we don't have a constitutional right to videotape? Oh, no. Now these people in the background are yelling racist and bigots and screaming. And here we are. We have to be let out of Boston by Boston police. Of course, now they all started to circle us and outnumbered us. We're the only 2 that were left in Boston, and now we certainly needed help. How are we going to get to our cars with these nutso cases, these commies trying to get to us? So the police realized that we had a problem, and they were going to help us get out of Boston. So what they decided to do was call for some backup. And even though these little maniacs are still screaming and yelling, the police call for backup. He's calling now the horse patrol. And 2 Americans who've lived in the country for 50 years now are going to be escorted by the Boston police out of Boston to safely go to our car, because these lunatics, these people who are wanting amnesty and rights for illegal aliens and everything else you can possibly give them, these people wouldn't leave us alone. And we were in fear that we didn't know what these people were going to do, vastly outnumbered by a bunch of lunatics, mental, stupid, ridiculous lunatics. And now we need to get out of Boston. So what's going to happen now, the police officer is getting on the phone. And right now he's calling over to the horses. As you see, they're coming over. We're going to be escorted out of the Boston Common by a police horse escort, because these lunatics who have their constitutional rights of freedom of speech don't want anybody else to have their rights of freedom of speech. And here we are, Jim and I are being led out of Boston by the horses and the policemen, with the lunatic people behind them yelling and screaming. And eventually they did stop and break off. And we finally got to our car safely. Thank God to the Boston police. Thank you very much.
But anyway.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see how it shakes out there tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be something. Well, anyway, Paul, I think that's pretty much it. I just want to catch up with you on some of these things. I'll let you know. We'll send you some links to if I get information on the rally tomorrow. I think that's going to be another interesting Charlottesville type of situation.
Yes.
But I think it's all going to be pro or left. I think my personal feeling, but we'll have to see what's going on there. Well, anyway, Paul, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate that. Let me just end by saying this is Jim Rizoli from Rizoli TV, and we will talk to you another time, folks. Bye now. All right, Paul, good job. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay,
Take
talk
care.
to you soon.
Bye.
Lie, 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 lie.